The park was nearly empty when Rachel Morgan clipped on Trooper's leash for what she thought would be a quiet evening walk. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across Maple Lane. Streetlights blinked on one by one, and the soft hum of suburban calm settled over the neighbourhood. She had clocked off shift 2 hours ago. No badge, no calls, just a worn hoodie, a travel mug of lukewarm coffee, and her old K9 partner padding faithfully at her side. Trooper, now more silver than tan around his muzzle, moved slower than he used to. His left eye had clouded over, and arthritis stiffened his back legs. But his nose? That was as sharp as ever. They reached the county library and rounded the corner near the maintenance lot when Trooper suddenly froze. His ears shot up, nose twitching. Then, without warning, he lunged toward a battered city trash can beside the building and started clawing at it with urgency. At first, Rachel thought he'd caught the scent of food, maybe a discarded burger or a leftover slice of pizza. "Easy, buddy," she said casually, giving the leash a gentle tug. "It's just trash." But Trooper didn't move. His whole body had gone tense, shoulders hunched, tail rigid, hackles slightly raised. The sound of his claws screeching against the metal echoed in the stillness. Rachel frowned. It wasn't like Trooper to get worked up over garbage. He wasn't barking to play or alert. This was something different, deeper, primal, like he'd caught the scent of something that didn't belong in this world. She glanced around the empty lot. No kids, no cars, just her, Trooper, and a sudden tightness in her chest. "All right," she muttered under her breath. "Let's see what's got your fur in a twist." She unclipped a mini flashlight from her jacket and pried open the lid. A wave of stench hit her like a wall. Sour soda, mouldy wrappers, and something metallic underneath. She wrinkled her nose and pushed aside a few layers of greasy trash with her gloved hand. And then she saw it. A hoodie. Grey, faded, and shoved into the corner of the bin like someone wanted to forget it ever existed. One sleeve was torn at the elbow, but that wasn't what made Rachel's fingers stop cold. Near the cuff, smeared and darkened, was a dried stain, a rusty brown red. Blood. Her breath caught in her throat. Not paint, not ketchup. Blood. She didn't need confirmation. Instinct, honed by years of patrols and crime scenes, flared in her gut like a flare. She pulled out her phone with a shaky hand and began snapping photos. Wide angle, close-up, sleeve detail. Then, using the cap of a pen, she lifted the fabric just enough to slide it into an evidence bag she always kept in her SUV. Old habits. Ones she was suddenly grateful hadn't faded. Trooper gave one last low growl, then sat beside her, calm once more. Like he knew his work was done. Rachel stood there for a long moment, the bag crinkling in her fingers. Her heart pounded in her ears. This wasn't nothing. This wasn't trash. This was a message, a whisper, a memory clawing its way back from the grave. And she hadn't thought of April Jensen in months. The girl had vanished 9 months ago, 17 years old, high school junior, last seen walking home near this very park. Rachel had been part of the initial search. She remembered combing these woods, crawling through thorn bushes, knocking on doors. No body, no blood, no trace, just rumours and one blurry security cam shot from a nearby gas station. April Jensen had vanished like mist, until now. Rachel didn't go straight to the station. She knew how that conversation would go. A bloody hoodie found in a public bin, probably a teen fight or animal attack. Nothing actionable, but the smell of that fabric was still in her nose, and Trooper's reaction was etched in her bones. Instead, she drove home in silence. Trooper curled up in the back seat, resting his head on the armrest between them. He looked satisfied, calm, but Rachel couldn't shake the feeling crawling up her spine. The evidence bag sat on the passenger seat beside her, and it felt like it was pulsing, whispering, calling out something she couldn't quite hear yet. Back at her house, she placed the bag in the freezer, just to preserve the sample until it could be properly processed. In fact, she poured herself a cup of tea and sat on the couch, Trooper's head in her lap, and she let her mind go where she hadn't let it go in months. April. She had stared at that girl's photo so many times, framed by her parents on the news, posted on flyers around the school. Rachel could still remember the poster, blonde hair in a braid, grey hoodie with a red logo, wide smile. Same hoodie? She hadn't let herself believe it. But now she couldn't ignore the signs. The next morning, she woke before the sun. She didn't even make breakfast. Just filled Trooper's bowl, loaded the evidence bag into her SUV, and drove 30 minutes east to the Oak Ridge Crime Lab. Faster processing, fewer questions. She logged the evidence under her badge number, kept her report minimal. Recovered item from public park, possible connection to missing person case. She didn't name April. Not yet. Back at the precinct, she tried to go about her day. Filed reports. Handled a neighbour dispute. Responded to a shoplifting call. But her thoughts kept circling. That hoodie, that stain, that park, that girl. As the sun dipped again and the air turned cool, she leashed up Trooper for another walk. This time she brought a fresh evidence kit and a flashlight, and a quiet prayer that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't what she thought it was. But deep down, she knew, because Trooper didn't bark at ghosts. He barked at truth. At stories no one else could hear. At pain that refused to stay buried. And last night he had found something that didn't belong in the trash. Something that had been lost. Someone, waiting to be heard. Rachel didn't head back to the trash can. Trooper didn't either. Instead, as twilight sank deeper over the quiet town, the old dog pulled her toward a different part of the park. A darker, lonelier stretch near the chain-link fence that separated city property from the woods behind it. It was the kind of place kids dared each other to go after sunset, and most adults ignored. But Trooper's gait was purposeful, nose to the wind, muscles tight. Rachel followed, flashlight in one hand, heart ticking like a slow metronome in her chest. He stopped near the edge of the lot. Just beyond the fence, tangled weeds reached waist-high. Rachel swept the beam of her light across the overgrown ground. Tire tracks, patches of dirt, nothing obvious. She was about to turn back when Trooper jolted to the right, lunging at a bramble of bushes by the gas station wall. He barked once, sharp, controlled, and began to dig. Rachel knelt beside him, pulse racing. The leaves crunched beneath her knees as she parted the bramble with gloved fingers. At first all she saw was dirt and old snack wrappers, but then, wedged between two stones, was something strange. A glove. It was partially burned, the fingertips blackened, edges melted like someone had tried to destroy it in a hurry. Rachel didn't touch it. She simply opened a new evidence bag, marked the location with a Sharpie, and sealed the glove inside. 2 strange items, 2 nights, 1 park, and 1 girl who never made it home. That night, Rachel sat at her kitchen table, cold coffee untouched beside her. Trooper snored softly on the rug. The case file sat open in front of her, the one she'd kept even after April Jensen's name had faded from the local headlines. April had been last seen 3 blocks from that trash can. Her outfit the day she vanished: jeans, sneakers, and a grey hoodie with a red logo on the front. Rachel stared at the evidence photo from the lab. Same brand, same colour, same tear in the left elbow. The blood on the sleeve, it wasn't just blood anymore. It had a name, a face. She closed the file slowly, fingers trembling. Someone had come back, or maybe someone had never left. The next morning, she drove to Oak Ridge to personally check in on the hoodie's processing. The lab technician didn't promise anything soon. It was early. But Rachel insisted on being notified the second any match came through. On her way back, she didn't blast the radio or take the usual scenic route. She drove in silence, replaying old interviews in her head. When she returned to the precinct, she stayed quiet, did her shift, filled out incident reports, took a call about a missing bike. But that night, she was back at the park. Trooper walked ahead, eyes sharp, tail stiff. This time, Rachel came prepared. Full evidence kit, extra gloves, 2 flashlights. She wasn't chasing ghosts, she was chasing a pattern. And Trooper was already pulling at the thread. He didn't hesitate. Led her again to the same area near the gas station. Only this time he curved behind it, nose working the edge of the fence line. Rachel's breath clouded in the cool air as she followed. They reached a small drainage ditch where weeds grew thick and trees leaned over like silent witnesses. Trooper sniffed along the stones, tail twitching, then stopped dead. He looked up at her, expectant. Ready. She stepped forward, sweeping her light across the ground, a faint indentation, disrupted earth. And there, buried under leaves, something pale and thin. A bracelet, silver chain, delicate, engraved with initials AJ. Rachel's chest constricted. April Jensen's mother had mentioned it once in the initial interview. A 16th birthday gift. April wore it every day. Rachel dropped to her knees, brushing away the debris with painstaking care. Next to the bracelet was a torn photograph, ripped clean down the middle. One half showed a smiling girl in school uniform. April. Rachel froze. Then, folded tightly beneath the picture, was a small note scribbled in jagged handwriting. She shouldn't have fought back. The words were uneven, desperate, maybe angry, maybe guilty. Rachel's hand shook as she slipped it all into a fresh evidence bag. This wasn't just coincidence. This wasn't a random drop of belongings in the woods. This was deliberate. This was staging. Someone wanted it gone, but not far. Someone thought they'd hidden it. But Trooper had found it. He'd always known where to look. Rachel logged the GPS coordinates and returned to the station just before midnight. She scanned the bracelet into evidence, updated the file, and then, with a heavy breath, picked up the phone. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was soft, hesitant. It had been months since they'd spoken. "Mrs. Jensen," Rachel said. "It's Officer Morgan. I found something today, near the park." Silence. "Is it about April?" the woman whispered. Rachel closed her eyes. "Yes, ma'am, we believe we found something that belonged to her. A bracelet and a photograph." There was a muffled sob, like a hand pressed to a mouth. "I gave her that bracelet," the woman said. She never took it off. Not once." "I'm so sorry," Rachel said. "I can't say more just yet, but I wanted you to hear it from me." "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up." Rachel hung up and sat still for a long time. Outside, the wind picked up, the kind of wind that carried old stories, the kind that slipped through cracks and whispered in your ear. Later that night, she took a slow drive through Evan Cole's neighborhood. His truck was parked where it always was. Lights off. House dark. Too dark. She didn't stop, just watched. She had a theory now, a shape to the silence that surrounded this case. Back at her own house, Trooper curled up by the window, head resting on his paws. Rachel stood at the sink, staring into nothing. Something was happening. Something old and buried had just taken its first breath in months. And her dog, retired or not, had just brought it back to life. The next morning, Rachel didn't waste time. She reviewed everything. The hoodie, the bracelet, the photo, the note. The pieces were no longer fragments. They were starting to form a picture, even if the edges were still blurred. But one thing stood out to her, stubborn and unshakable. That hoodie. She pulled up the photo again, the one from the evidence bag. The colour, the tear, the logo, it all matched what April was last seen wearing. But something gnawed at her. What if it wasn't April's? What if it belonged to someone else? April had been overheard saying something to that effect, hadn't she? Rachel combed through the interview transcripts again, and there it was. A local barista, Becca, had mentioned that April seemed paranoid in the days before her disappearance, said someone was following her. No name, no vehicle, just a man in a grey hoodie, always across the street, watching. At the time, it hadn't been actionable, too vague. A hoodie wasn't a fingerprint, but now Rachel had a hoodie, a real one, with blood. What if it wasn't April's at all? What if it belonged to him? She stared at the image longer, her jaw tight. Whoever tossed it knew what they were doing. Whoever threw it away wanted to erase something. But Trooper had found it anyway. Rachel left the precinct with no fanfare. She didn't call for backup. She didn't tell Murphy. She just walked out, quiet and calm, and hit the street again. This time, she started behind the gas station, the same spot Trooper had pulled her toward days before. The bushes still looked undisturbed. The trash had settled back into place, but she wasn't here for leftovers. She needed eyes, witnesses, or something close enough. She approached an older man she recognized, a maintenance worker named Leroy Mitchell, always kept to himself, but known around town for paying attention to things no one else noticed. "Morning, Leroy," Rachel said, hands in her pockets. He leaned back from the broken fence he'd been patching. "Officer Morgan," he greeted her, wiping his brow. "Everything all right?" "I hope so," she replied. "Got a minute?" He nodded. Rachel pulled a photo of April from her pocket. "Do you remember this girl?" Leroy squinted at the image. "Yeah, she was on the news, right? Went missing last year." "That's her," Rachel confirmed. "Do you work around here much?" "Every Tuesday and Thursday," he said. "For the past couple years." Rachel took a breath and pulled out the photo of the hoodie. "Ever seen one like this?" Leroy frowned, thoughtful. "Looks like the kind they sell at that surplus store, Coleman's, near the train tracks. They carry cheap stuff, hoodies, boots, army gear." Rachel's pulse quickened. That helps more than you know." She thanked him and headed straight to the outlet. Coleman's military surplus looked like a relic from another decade. The windows were dusty. The mannequins in the front wore faded camo jackets. A rusty bell jingled as she stepped inside. Behind the counter stood a thin man in an army veteran cap, chewing sunflower seeds. His name tag read Walt. "Help you, officer?" he asked, voice casual. Rachel held up the hoodie photo. "Recognize this?" Walt leaned in, squinting. "Yep, that's one of ours. Used to sell 'em 3 for $20. Haven't had that brand in for a while, though. Any way to track who bought them?" He snorted. "Cash only. No ID. People don't exactly sign receipts for hoodies." Rachel nodded. "Anyone ever give you trouble wearing one like this?" Walt paused. Something flickered in his eyes. "There was this guy, early 20s. Skinny. Came in a lot. Always asked weird questions about knives and bush gear. Said he worked in laundry, but he smelled like gas and metal. Creeped my niece out." "Name?" Walt scratched his neck. "Didn't catch it. But he drove a red pickup. Rusty thing, tail light patched up with duct tape." Rachel's fingers tightened around the photo. That helped more than he knew. Back at the station, she pulled vehicle reports from the area, filtered for red pickups, focused on damage citations. One name stood out: Evan Cole. Her breath caught. Evan had been interviewed during the original investigation. He'd claimed he was working the night April disappeared, at an industrial laundry facility. His alibi had been backed by a co-worker. Nothing had stuck. But now, a red truck, a matching hoodie, and a dog who had just dug up buried truths behind his neighborhood. Rachel pulled Evan's file again. He lived less than 4 blocks from where April was last seen. This couldn't be ignored. That evening, she didn't go home. She drove instead to Evan Cole's neighborhood, parked a block away. Let Trooper ride in the passenger seat beside her, ears perked, tail still. She approached the door and knocked. It took a while to open. When it did, Evan looked thinner than his photo. Hollow cheeks, twitchy eyes, oil-stained hands. Behind him, a faint smell of gasoline drifted from a half-open window. "Officer," he said with an awkward smile. "Everything okay?" Rachel kept her voice neutral. "Just a follow-up on an old case." His smile twitched. "That again?" "I'm afraid so." He leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "I already gave my statement." "I know, but sometimes evidence resurfaces." Something flickered behind his eyes. His jaw clenched, then relaxed. Trooper stepped forward. He didn't bark, didn't growl, but he went still, statue still. His nose twitched, his eyes locked on Evan. Rachel felt it too. That subtle shift in the air, the tension, the sense of being close to something rotten. "You mind if I take a look around your shed?" she asked. Evan hesitated. "It's a mess, tools and junk." Rachel gave a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "All the same." That night she didn't push, didn't demand a warrant. But she had a plan. She had instinct. And more importantly, she had Trooper. The next morning, Rachel's phone buzzed as she sipped her coffee at the diner. She opened the notification and froze. Lab results. Confirmed DNA match. The dried blood on the hoodie belonged to April Jensen. Rachel sat still in the corner booth, the clink of dishes and low chatter fading around her. It wasn't just suspicion now. It wasn't just a feeling or a hunch or an old dog's growl. It was fact. April had bled in that hoodie, and someone had tried to erase that fact behind a trash can months after she vanished. Rachel flagged down the waitress for a to-go cup and dropped some cash on the table. Back at the precinct, she dropped the report on Captain Murphy's desk. He read it in silence, then muttered, "So she really was. She was hurt, possibly killed," Rachel said, "and someone tried to hide it. Do we have enough for a warrant?" "Not yet," Rachel admitted, "but we're close." "Don't push him too hard," Murphy warned. "Not until we're sure. We don't want him lawyering up." Rachel nodded, but her gut twisted, because she didn't trust Evan Cole to sit still, not after Trooper's reaction, not after what they'd found. She needed more, and if she couldn't get it inside his house, maybe the truth was still out there, waiting, just like April. That afternoon, Rachel made her decision. She didn't go home. She didn't even return to the station. Instead, she drove straight to the woods behind the park, off the main trail, into the parts most people didn't bother with. It was wild back there. Brambles, overgrown fencing, muddy paths, and the thick, damp scent of old rain in the air. She moved with purpose, flashlight ready, evidence kit slung over her shoulder. And Trooper? He was in his element. The old dog walked ahead with his nose to the ground, tail low, movements focused and deliberate, just like in the old days. Every few feet he paused, sniffed the air, then continued on. Rachel didn't speak. She let him lead, step by step, deeper into the forgotten trail. After about 20 minutes of silent walking, Trooper stopped. He scratched once, twice. Then again, harder, more insistent. Rachel crouched next to him, heart thudding in her chest. At the base of a moss-covered log, under a wet pile of decomposing leaves, something glinted faintly. She pulled off her gloves, fingers trembling slightly, and began to clear away the debris. It was a small metal box, old, rusted, sealed shut with age and dirt. She pried it open with her knife, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, wrapped in a mouldy piece of cloth, were 3 items. First, a bracelet, thin silver chain, tarnished but still intact. The engraving was barely visible in the dim light, but she didn't need to read it to know what it was. AJ. April Jensen. Second, a torn photograph. The left half missing. The right half showed a girl smiling in a school uniform, April again. And third, a small note, scribbled in a rush. The words smeared, but still legible. She shouldn't have fought back. Rachel's stomach turned. She stared at the note, the photo, the bracelet, and then closed her eyes, feeling the weight of it settle on her like rain-soaked wool. This wasn't just a clue. It was a confession. It was something someone had buried and hoped no one would ever find. But Trooper had found it. She slid the items into fresh evidence bags, marked the GPS coordinates in her notepad, then sat back on her heels, staring into the woods as if the trees might whisper more secrets. At the station, Rachel logged the evidence carefully. Every detail, every location, every timestamp. Then she opened April's file again. Yes, the bracelet matched the one April's mother described during the initial interview. A birthday gift, worn daily. She hesitated only a moment before picking up the phone. The voice on the other end was trembling even before she spoke. Hello? Mrs. Jensen, it's Officer Morgan. I found something today, near the park. A pause, a sharp breath. Is it about April? Yes, ma'am. A bracelet, a photo. We believe they belonged to her. There was no scream, just the sound of a quiet sob, muffled by a sleeve. I gave her that bracelet, the woman said, voice breaking. She never took it off, not once. Rachel closed her eyes. I wanted you to hear it from me. Thank you, came the whisper, for not giving up. That night, Rachel took the long way home, but she didn't go inside. She circled back to Evan Cole's street. The house was dark, too dark. His red pickup sat in the driveway, tail light still patched with duct tape. She parked a block away, engine off, lights off, and waited. It was just after 10 when the front door opened. Evan stepped outside. Jacket zipped, cap pulled low. He carried a black duffel bag. His movements were quick, practiced, and just cautious enough to make her sit up straighter. He looked over his shoulder before tossing the bag into the truck bed. Rachel followed when he pulled out of the driveway. Quietly. Headlights off, a safe distance. He didn't stop for gas, didn't head to a store. Instead, he drove toward the edge of town, toward the old quarry, abandoned for years after a landslide shut it down. The kind of place no one had business being at night. He parked near a rusted utility shed and killed his lights. Rachel waited 5 full minutes, then stepped out of her SUV. Trooper followed close behind, silent as shadow. They moved slowly, avoiding dry branches and loose gravel. Rachel crept through the brush, keeping eyes on the shed. From 30 feet out, she saw Evan open the door and pull something from the duffel. It was a shovel. Her gut twisted. She snapped 3 quick photos from her phone. "Stay," she whispered to Trooper. He obeyed, but his muscles tensed like springs, eyes locked on the target. Rachel stepped forward, flashlight in one hand, the other resting on her holstered sidearm. "Evan Cole," she called out, voice firm. "This is Officer Rachel Morgan. Step away from the shed." He spun, eyes wide. For a split second, he looked like he might run. Then his hands rose slowly. "What the hell are you doing out here?" she demanded. "Just dumping some junk," he said too fast. "Old tools." 10 o'clock at night? He swallowed, didn't want to wake the neighbors. Rachel gestured to the duffel. "Open it, slowly." Evan hesitated, then unzipped the bag. Inside, gloves, bleach, a crowbar, heavy-duty trash bags. Her heart sank. "What's under the tarp in the shed?" she asked. "Nothing, just tools." "Step back." She moved to the shed, yanked back the tarp, a muddy shovel, a half-buried plastic bucket, a pair of boots, same tread pattern from April's missing scene. "Stop!" she shouted as Evan bolted. She gave chase, adrenaline flaring. Trooper shot forward like a missile, crashing through underbrush, his bark loud and commanding. He didn't bite. He herded, cutting Evan off, pushing him back toward Rachel. Evan tripped, hit the dirt hard. Rachel reached him moments later, cuffs in hand. "You're done running, Evan." Back at the station, Evan sat in interview room B, silent. His lawyer, a smug man in a rumpled suit, told him not to speak. And he didn't. Didn't say a word when they showed him the bracelet, the photo, the bleach kit, the boots, April's blood on the hoodie. But Rachel wasn't ready to walk away. She stood over him, eyes hard. "You think silence keeps you safe?" she asked. Evan said nothing. She dropped the photo of April on the table, half of it. "Where's the other half?" she demanded. Still silence. Rachel leaned in close. "We know this is April. We know the bracelet belonged to her, and we know you kept this. We just don't know why." Evan looked up slowly. For the first time, Rachel saw it. Guilt. Raw. Unfiltered. Still, he said nothing. Outside the room, Captain Murphy approached. "We got a hit," he said, handing Rachel a folder. "On what?" "The glove. Print wasn't Evan's." Rachel opened the file. "Tyrell Madsen," Murphy said. "Out of Ohio. Assault, stalking, petty theft. Moved here around the same time April went missing. Listed employer." Rachel's blood ran cold. "Coal Industrial Laundry," she whispered. Murphy nodded. "Worked same shift as Evan." Rachel closed the file slowly. Everything was shifting. Maybe Evan wasn't the monster after all. Maybe he was just afraid. Or worse, controlled. Rachel returned to the interrogation room. Didn't sit. She dropped Tyrell Madsen's mugshot on the table. "Recognize him?" Evan froze. That was enough. "He worked with you," she said. "You lied about being alone that night." Still silence. Rachel walked slowly around the table. "You didn't kill her, did you?" Evan's jaw clenched. His eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "You saw something. Maybe helped hide something. Maybe you were scared." She pointed to the photo. "You kept this because you couldn't let her disappear completely." His lips parted, then closed again. Rachel leaned in. "Where's the other half, Evan?" No answer. But she could see it now. He wasn't hiding the truth because he wanted to. He was hiding it because someone told him to. And that someone, Rachel was sure, was still out there. Rachel barely made it home before her phone rang. She had just pulled into her driveway when the screen lit up with an unknown number. The caller ID gave her nothing, just a block of digits. She hesitated, then answered. "Officer Morgan." The voice rasped on the other end, low and tight with fear. "You're digging up things that should have stayed buried." Rachel's blood chilled. "Who is this?" Silence. She waited, breath held. "You don't want to know," the voice replied. "But you're making a mistake." "Tyrell?" she asked quietly. The line went dead. Rachel stared at the screen long after the call ended, heart thudding. She turned her engine back on and reversed out of the driveway. There would be no rest tonight. That voice, it was more than a threat. It was a warning. And it confirmed what she already knew. Tyrell Madsen wasn't just a name on a file. He was real. He was watching, and he was still in town. She headed to the precinct first, pulled up Tyrell's employment record again. No forwarding address. No known family in the area. No activity since the day after April disappeared. It was like he'd vanished. But people like Tyrell didn't vanish. They slithered into cracks, waiting for the light to move away. And Rachel wasn't moving the light. She remembered one name buried in the original employment files. Rita Madsen, a cousin. Not listed as emergency contact, not interviewed. Just a name with a rural address off a dirt road north of town. It was something. Maybe the last thread left. By late afternoon, Rachel was driving through farmland and thinning forest, trooper alert in the seat beside her. The road turned to gravel, then to rutted earth. A crooked mailbox marked the address, R. Madsen, half buried in vines. A rusted-out pickup sat beside a sagging porch. The house itself was small, sun-faded, windows dark. Rachel parked 2 houses away and approached on foot. No sound, no movement. Then behind the shed, a flicker of motion. Fast, shadowed. Her heart jumped. She rounded the fence in time to see him. Tyrell Madsen, ducking into the tree line wearing a camo jacket, hood pulled low. "Stop!" Rachel shouted, breaking into a sprint. "Tyrell Madsen, police!" He didn't stop. Branches whipped across her arms, leaves crunched underfoot. Tyrell ducked low, cutting through brush like a man who'd done it before. Rachel's breath came hard and sharp. "Trooper, go!" The dog surged ahead like lightning, bounding over roots and around trees with impossible speed. Tyrell glanced back, saw him, panicked, and swung a fallen branch in defense. Trooper dodged, barking loud and sharp, cutting off Tyrell's escape path. Rachel pushed forward, gun drawn. "Hands where I can see them!" Tyrell froze, panting hard. "You don't get it," he rasped. "You weren't there." "I don't care where you were," Rachel snapped, stepping closer. "I care about April Jensen, and you're going to tell me what happened." He dropped to his knees, hands trembling in the air. "I didn't mean to kill her," he whispered. Rachel's breath caught. The confession came in fragments like shattered glass. He'd followed April for weeks, first out of curiosity, then obsession. He thought she was kind. She always smiled. She always walked alone. That night, he waited behind the gas station. He thought he'd just talk to her. She got scared, tried to run, fought back. He panicked, choked her. She died. He buried what he could, burned what he couldn't, hid what was left. Evan found out later, threatened to go to the cops, so Tyrell forced him to help, guilt-tripped him, scared him. "He's not like me," Tyrell said, eyes watery. He didn't want any part of it. Rachel stared at him, disgust tightening in her throat. But he never told anyone. "Fear makes people do stupid things," Tyrell murmured. Back at the station, Rachel sat across from April's parents in a private room. She didn't show them everything, just one item, a pendant, small, silver, heart-shaped, with a tiny rose etched in the front. Mrs. Jensen gasped when she saw it. Tears broke across her face like a dam bursting. She clutched it to her chest. "I gave this to her when she was 13, she said through sobs. "She wore it every day." "Mr." Jensen sat beside her, trembling. His hand reached across the table, rested on Rachel's. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on her." Rachel couldn't speak. Her throat was tight, eyes burning. "It wasn't me," she said finally. "It was Trooper. He never let it go." 2 hours later, the mayor called, asking for a statement. Rachel gave one, brief, factual, free of drama. But she made one request, that Trooper, though retired, be officially recognized for his role. A week later, they held the ceremony at City Hall. The room was full, reporters, town officials, school teachers, families, children holding handmade signs that read, "Thank you, Trooper." The mayor stepped up to the podium and spoke of justice, of perseverance, of heroes who walk on 4 legs. Then he knelt and pinned a medal to Trooper's collar. For valor, instinct, and service beyond duty. The old dog didn't move, didn't react to the flashes or the applause. But when Rachel knelt beside him and whispered, "You brought her home, partner," he leaned gently into her hand. Spring came late that year. The snow lingered, melting slow, turning the town damp and green. On one quiet morning, Rachel walked through the park with Trooper, past the bench, past the painted trash can. A plaque had been installed beneath it. "For April, you are never forgotten." Rachel stood silently, her hand resting on Trooper's head. She remembered that first bark, that first scratch, that first warning growl no one else had understood. "Thanks for being stubborn," she whispered. He leaned into her side, old but proud. The case was closed now. Tyrell Madsen had pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and evidence tampering. His confession, combined with the journal, the pendant, and the recovered blood, left little room for argument. Evan Cole, for his part, cooperated fully. He admitted to helping Tyrell hide evidence, but never knew the full truth. He received a lighter sentence, accessory after the fact, with mandatory counselling and public restitution. April's remains were buried near her family's home. Hundreds came to the service. Rachel sat in the back row, hand resting gently on Trooper's collar. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence said enough. The town was healing, slowly, unevenly, but healing all the same. Weeks later, on a day soft with breeze and birdsong, Rachel took Trooper for a long drive beyond the town limits. They parked near the hills, where pine trees swayed and the air smelled like rain and freedom. She spread a blanket under a wide oak and sat with her coffee while Trooper wandered just a few feet away, sniffing the edges of the world. He barked once at a squirrel, trotted to the stream, then came back and lay beside her, content. "I've been thinking," Rachel said aloud. Everyone called it a cold case. She looked down at him. "But it wasn't cold to you, was it?" His ears twitched. She smiled, eyes glistening. "You knew all along. You just couldn't let it go." She watched the stream flow and thought about how many detectives spent their careers chasing one answer, one child, one piece of truth. Trooper had found it with a scratch at a trash can, and he had never stopped until April was home. That summer, everything changed. Rachel took on a new role, canine liaison for the county. Her job was no longer chasing suspects or filing reports. It was mentoring younger officers and their dogs, helping train both in instinct-based tracking, not just textbook obedience. She gave talks at community centres, visited local schools, and shared what she had learned, not from a manual, but from experience. Trooper was with her every step of the way. He walked slower now, with a stiffer gait and heavier breath, but he never missed a session. Kids adored him. Officers respected him. And Rachel? She just stayed close, watching him with the quiet gratitude that only comes from knowing how much you owe someone who can't speak. Until the Tuesday morning he didn't come to the door. It was small at first. The absence of paws tapping the kitchen tile, no tail thumping against the cabinets, no soft wine for breakfast or that familiar look that said, "Where's my piece of bacon?" Rachel called his name. No answer. She found him curled beneath the willow tree in the backyard. The sun filtered through the branches, dappled across his fur. His head rested on a patch of clover. His body was still, peaceful, gone. She dropped to her knees beside him, fingers trembling as they ran through his fur, her forehead pressed to his neck. "You saved her," she whispered. "You saved me." She didn't cry right away. She just sat there, hand over his old K9 badge, the one he used to wear with pride. The silence around her felt too loud. A week later they held the memorial. Most dogs don't get a procession. Trooper wasn't most dogs. Retired officers came from across the state. Local students brought hand-drawn cards. A boy with autism, whom Trooper had once comforted during a school event, placed a stuffed squirrel on his casket. Rachel stood in uniform, straight-backed, tears in her eyes, one hand on the folded flag bearing Trooper's name. In her other hand, she held the first badge he ever wore. She gave no speech. The mayor did. He read a formal statement, filled with respect and reverence. But it was the silence afterward that carried the most weight, the kind of silence Trooper had taught everyone to listen to. Time passed. Seasons changed. April's plaque remained at the park bench. The flowers were kept fresh by volunteers. Kids still played nearby, laughing, unaware of what had once been hidden there. Rachel kept walking by that trash can. Sometimes in the early morning, when the streets were still and the air hung heavy with dew, she swore she could hear it, the scratch of claws against metal, that low, steady growl. That moment when Trooper had refused to walk away. She'd stop and close her eyes, letting the memory settle in. Some dogs never retire. One evening, months after the trial, Rachel got a call from dispatch. A red pickup, registered to Evan Cole, had been found abandoned behind the old feed store off Route 17. Back window smashed. Blood on the passenger seat. She turned her SUV around without hesitation. The feed store had been shut down for years, just a shell of corrugated metal, surrounded by tall grass and fence line. The truck sat quiet, half hidden beneath a tangle of branches. Rachel stepped out, flashlight in hand, and opened the driver's side door. Blood, dark and dried, stained the seat. A trail led away into the overgrowth. Her heart pounded. She opened the back door and let Trooper out by habit. Then she remembered. He wasn't there. She stood frozen for a moment, the absence hollowing out her chest. Then she followed the trail herself. It led to a shallow patch of disturbed dirt. No body, but something buried under a thin layer of leaves. She crouched, brushed it away. A photo. The other half of the one they'd found in the metal box. April stood smiling in it, but now beside her was someone else. A young man in a grey hoodie, arm around her shoulder. Tyrell Madsen. Rachel stared at it for a long time before sliding it into an evidence bag. She called Captain Murphy. "I think Evan's been covering for someone else this whole time," she said quietly. "Think he helped move the body?" Murphy asked. "I think he helped hide the photo," Rachel replied. "The bracelet, maybe more, but I don't think he ever hurt her. I think he was scared." Murphy's voice dropped. "You think Tyrell's still in town?" Rachel opened her laptop, pulled up Tyrell's last known address. Nothing. No forwarding, no family contact, just a void. She got a warrant. Searched the duplex he used to rent, a low-rent unit 5 miles out of town. Dust coated every surface. The fridge still had milk expired 10 months ago. A mattress lay bare on the floor. In the closet, a grey hoodie, worn sneakers, a black cap, everything April had been reported wearing. and then she found the drawer full of knives. Rachel sat outside the duplex front, elbows on her knees, head low. She missed Trooper, his nose, his bark, his certainty. She could still feel him beside her, even though he was gone. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. She answered, a voice deep and shaking. "You're still digging. You should have stopped." "Tyrell?" she asked. Silence. "I'm coming for you," she said. Click. The line went dead. She sat in her SUV, watching the darkness thicken. That voice, it was afraid and angered, which meant she was close. The next morning she drove past town into the hills. She parked at the edge of a quiet trail. No evidence, no plan, just instinct. She pulled a blanket from the trunk, a thermos of coffee, and sat on the grass. Trooper used to sit beside her, watching squirrels, letting the wind ruffle his ears. Today, he wasn't there, but somehow she felt him anyway. She looked out over the valley. "I've been thinking," she said softly. Everyone kept calling it a cold case. She glanced beside her, where he would have been. "But it wasn't cold to you, was it?" The silence around her didn't answer, but her chest did, something deep and certain. The way he had stood in front of that trash can, growling at the ghost inside, the way he had followed the scent no one else believed in. "You knew?" she whispered. "All along. You just couldn't let it go." That thought hit her like a wave. Some detectives spend their entire careers chasing a single truth, a single family, a single face that vanished into the dark. Trooper brought one home, with nothing but a scratch at a trash can. Rachel sat for a long while, letting the silence soak in. The sky turned gold. The wind shifted. Somewhere a bird called out. She stood, dusted off her pants, and turned back toward town. There was still more to do, more cases, more silence waiting to be broken. And Rachel Morgan would be there, listening, watching, and remembering the dog who refused to retire until the truth was found.